Welcome back to New Amsterdam Radio, the podcast for creatives. You see, it's your boy Flobo, just sitting here rapping, hanging out with one of the more creative creators I've ever met. This guy reminds me of like my innermost thoughts because he's always thinking about something cool. If dreams were color, this guy is a kaleidoscope. I want to give my man Gary Alvarez. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you, brother. How are you?
I'm good, man. How was the intro? The intro okay? I was trying to work on that. Like, how would I describe what you are in your essence? You know?
I thought it was very poetic. You
Well,
know?
well, I think it
Yeah.
fits. I think it fits. We gotta go before we even get into like how we met and all that stuff. Like you do so much because we met in film school as a filmmaker, but like you're also an educator now. If you were at a party, man, how would you describe what you do to someone who's uninitiated to your brand?
Wow, I hadn't thought about it as a brand. I'm still kind of getting used to that aspect of the work that I do. But I think just to, put it simply, I would say I would describe myself as an independent filmmaker slash educator. I started off as a teacher many years ago, and I ended up transitioning into a career in filmmaking in my mid 20s. And after film school, where you and I met, um, my path took me back to teaching. Although the second time around, I'm teaching film production now, whereas when I first started, I was teaching world history.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Like,
Yeah,
what
man.
made you decide to try the teaching film? I know they say that you can work on your craft, and once you have that base of world history, you can always go back to that. But you decided to transition your educating journey to film. What was the decision for that?
Are you asking from teaching history to film or film to teaching?
Yeah, yeah, history to film. Like, cause like you can always okay. So at film school or any kind of college, you hear the story of like the weekend warrior. You know, the teachers that come in and do their thing on weekends. They make movies, right? But it was a very conscious decision, I think, in your case, to teach a next generation of individuals the craft and art of film. Why was that like something you wanted to pursue?
It's funny you say that because when I tell people that I was teaching history before film school, and they think that it's such a huge leap. But if you think about history as one long story, and filmmaking as telling stories with pictures,
Yeah,
the leap isn't the gap isn't as wide. For me, it just felt like a natural progression. I remember when I was a kid, I would be in social studies class and reading about world civilizations, and I would finish my work and I would just flip through it, and I was just always intrigued and interested in reading stories, about Genghis Khan. Or I remember one that stuck out was when they found the terracotta army
yeah.
that was buried in like ancient China. Reading about the Persian Empire, stuff like that. It was just fascinating. And I grew up in a family of storytellers. My dad was an amazing storyteller. When he would drop me off at school, it was a 20-minute drive, and so he would always share stories about him growing up on a ranch in Mexico. So as a kid, I was just drawn to history, and that's what I decided to study as an undergrad. And I fell into teaching kind of out of necessity. And when I moved back from Berkeley, I was looking for a job. I didn't go to Cal to become a teacher per se. I think part of it was out of necessity, and part of it was I was already kind of going in that direction. Anyways, I knew that I wanted to be of service to my community.
Right,
Um, Although at the time I had no intention of ever coming back to LA. So that
right.
part was just life throwing a curveball at me.
It's funny
And
how life does that.
yep, yep. And I remember teaching for a few years, and I had always been writing. And as a matter of fact, I took a road trip. I hitchhiked from Mexico all the way from the west coast to the east coast, and my plan was to write a manuscript for a novel. And when I came back from this trip, I remember having this conversation with a filmmaker friend of mine, and he's like, "This is a very cinematic story. You should turn this into a screenplay." And I had never written a screenplay before, so
Yeah.
I took a screenwriting class at Long Beach City, and I really dug it. And then I realized, well, what if nobody wants to direct my screenplay? I got to learn how to direct it myself. So I took a production class. I really dug it, and then I realized, well, what if nobody wants to edit my film? I better learn how to do that myself too. I took a post class and realized I did not like editing. I had a horrible experience, and I decided I did not want to edit.
Yeah.
And funny thing is that in that very first production class that I took at Long Beach City is where I met our good friend, our mutual friend, Erica Concha.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And she was my editor through all those years, you know. And then she graduated and she ended up going to Chapman. And at the time when she left, this is about 2008. She reached. I was thinking about applying to film school, so I reached out to everybody that I knew that had gone through the process, and she was one of them. She's like, "Why don't you come check out Chapman?" And I'm like, "Well, what the hell's Chapman?
Yeah. That's what I felt too. What is
Where
it?
is that?" Yeah, I had never heard of it, you know. And so I went. I drove out to Chapman and I scoped it out, and I was just blown away by the facilities more than anything else. You know, I felt like a little mini studio, and I had already toured AFI, you know, which is the one of the top schools in the country. And what I saw at AFI, I felt like Chapman was like the 21st century version of AFI. So I was just impressed, and so I applied to all the big schools, and I got into Columbia on the wait list, and I got into AFI in the screenwriting program. And Chapman's like, "Well, you can write and direct here." And I'm like,
Right.
"Fuck you, AFI, I'm out." So that's Chapman.
Deuces.
Chapman what would allowed me to do both. Whereas AFI, they're like, "Nah, you got into the screenwriting, and that's where you're gonna stay." And so it just fit, you know.
That is a cool story as it is, but you had me sold at hitchhiking across Mexico. Was that like the intent? Where you're like, I'm gonna go on this journey and define the story and find myself, or just like something happened that just related to you to do that? Because that seems to be the spark that cascaded to everything else.
Yeah, man. Two things happened. I read Jack Kerouac's On the Road in my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, that book remains one of the most influential and inspiring pieces of literature that I've read. Uh, so I read that, and the other thing too is much like in On the Road. If you read it, or if your listeners haven't read it, the book starts with Jack experiencing a loss in his family, and strangely, I experienced that too. My dad had passed away um, in 2002, a few months after I graduated from Cal. And you know, I felt like I just needed to get the fuck out of here. You know, I needed to get out of LA, and that seemed like the logical thing to do is just hit the road, you know, and
Yeah.
see what happens. You know, I really did, it was a one-way ticket. Actually, I didn't even have a ticket. It was just a one-way trip. I had no intention of coming back. It's not that I was opposed to it. If I came back, cool. If I didn't, it was all the same to me at that point, you know.
Yeah.
And the original plan, actually, because I did kind of brainstorm it a little bit, my original plan. So at the time, I was driving a 2001 new Beetle, which looked like little spaceships to me, you know. And so I used to call it the Pod. And the plan was to drive the Pod to its birthplace. At that time, they weren't being made in Germany anymore. They were made in the city of Puebla in Mexico. That didn't happen. Needless to say, I managed to drive all the way down to Ensenada.
It's not
Uh,
even close to Puebla.
yeah, no, it's not even on the mainland, man.
What the?
uh, and then, so what ended up happening was my partner at the time, I told her to, you know, take the car back to Long Beach, where I was staying at the time. And then I resorted. I didn't really have a plan B. I'm like, fuck, I just know that I needed to get there. And fortunately, I had saved up some cash to make this trip. And so from there, I hitchhiked all the way down to Baja, to Land's End. And then from Baja, I took a ferry over to the mainland. And my folks are from Mexico, and my mom at the time was living in the state of Nayarit. And so she met me in Mazatlan. And then from there, I stayed with my mom for a couple of days just to spend some quality time with my mama because I love her very much. And then from there, it was just on. Like, well, you know, I ended up going to Tequila and going to the whole, like, the town, the pueblo, and hitting up the distilleries. And I had made friends from when I was an undergrad at Cal. I did the education abroad program, and I studied in Mexico City in 2000. And so I had some peeps already in Mexico City that gave me a couch to crash on. And so when I got to Mexico City, reunited with them, and you know, we had a blast. And then I was doing some research. You know, at that point, that was going to be the end of it. I was like, oh, I guess this is it. You know, and then I was doing some research. And at the time, I don't know if you remember internet cafes, man.
Yeah, I do. I studied abroad in Central America. That's all the rage.
Yeah, man. So I went to an internet cafe. I was just checking my email, and then I saw that there was going to be this a music festival in Cancun, and Shaka Khan was headlining,
Whoa.
featuring Poncho Sanchez and my friends Los Amigos Invisibles. And I'm like, this is a sign, man. Like, I got to keep going, you know.
Yeah.
So I called, I emailed my partner at the time, and I'm like, hey, there's this festival going on in Cancun. Meet me in Mexico City. She had a family living in Mexico City, and let's go to this festival in Cancun. It was like I wouldn't say it was like Coachella because it was only like I think a 1 day event. But if you can imagine, we get there and they built a stage on the sand, you know, and my friends Los Amigos came on, and Poncho Sanchez came on, and then Shaka Khan came on, and it was just amazing, dude. It was
Yeah.
one of those things, you know, that once in a lifetime kind of thing. And so we made it to Cancun. At that point, I had a partner along the journey, and I had always seen, you know, when I was studying abroad, I had always wanted to check out these Mayan ruins in a place called Tulum. Have you ever been?
No, but I know that the Mayan ruins are out there. Yeah.
It's amazing, man. It's this Mayan temple that's perched on a cliff overlooking the Caribbean, and I had always wanted to explore them. I'm fascinated with Mayan history and culture and Aztec history and
That
culture.
was my minor in college, by the way. I don't know
Really,
if yeah, it was Latin American studies. Yeah.
that's badass, man. So
Yeah.
and that's part of the reason why I wanted to study in Mexico. I feel like in high school, that part of my history wasn't taught to me, you know, and so when I went to Mexico City to the National University in Mexico City, I wanted to learn about that history that I felt like I was purposely deprived of, which is another conversation. But
Well, let's have it. What I mean, I am not Mexican, so but I've seen things from afar. Like I love the architecture of Mexico City. I love some of the music out of Monterrey. See, like some of the Pachoa guitars and all that. But I have a very limited view of what Mexico is and what the culture is shared to individuals and it's brought down. I've had guests before of Mexican descent, and there's always seems to be this common through line of what greatness that culture is and what is actually being portrayed. What exactly is the disconnect in your opinion?
um, I think I think like with every culture, we tend to take the good and kind of just conveniently push aside the bad that makes us, you know, that provides some kind of point of conflict, you know. And yes, the Aztec and the Mayan civilizations were some of the greatest in the history of mankind. But like any empire, it had its flaws. You know, the Aztecs built arguably the greatest civilization in the Western Hemisphere at the cost, but at the same time, they were a warring civilization. You know, and they enslaved a lot of people. And while it's a source of pride for Mexicans and Mexican Americans and Chicanos like me, um, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I thought I lost you. Um, you know, we tend to brush that aside, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that and don't forget that yes, while these civilizations were great, they also had their flaws. But in relation to American culture, you know, I grew up in Southern California in LA, born and raised, and I grew up in a working class neighborhood where mostly everybody spoke Spanish, and most of us were lived under the poverty line, the federal poverty line, and I didn't know that until I applied for FAFSA for the first time, and I asked my dad for his pay stubs,
Yeah,
and then I looked. I don't know if you remember filling out the FAFSA, man.
I do. You have to if you want aid. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's when I found out that by the federal guidelines that we were legally poor, you know. And but I did have the opportunity to go to school in Downey, which, if your listeners aren't familiar with, it's a more affluent neighborhood. The Carpenters are from Downey. James Hetfield of Metallica is from Downey. There's more money, and at the time it was more white. That those demographics have changed, but so that's kind of the environment where I ended up getting my middle schooling and my high schooling. And even though I took advanced classes, there wasn't much discussed in my history classes regarding, you know, my Mexican heritage, and that's by design. You know, it's just by design. That's the way the textbooks are written. That's the way the curriculum is developed. And so that's where the disconnect, when I first started to notice disconnect as a teenager, and which is why when I went to Berkeley, I made a conscious choice to major in Chicano studies. And when I came back and I shared that information with my family and friends, they're like, "What the fuck are you gonna do with Chicano studies?"
Yeah.
And to be honest, at the time, I didn't really have a solid answer to that question. All I knew was that I needed to know that information for my personal appreciation, my personal knowledge, my personal growth, and whatever career path I would follow would come later, and I would be, at least I would have, a solid education from the number one ranked university at that time in the United States, which was UC Berkeley.
Yeah.
So that's where the cultural disconnect is, and here I had an opportunity to finally make it to the eastern part of Mexico, which I had never been, to the Yucatan Peninsula. We went to Chichen Itza, we went to Tulum. And then when I was in at the Los Amigos Invisibles show with Shaka Khan, my friends were DJing at a bar at some place called Playa del Carmen. Have you ever been to Playa del Carmen?
No, I haven't been to Mexico. Well, Ensenada, but that doesn't really count. I
Oh,
haven't been to the
Ensenada.
mainland.
Yeah, no, Ensenada counts, man. That's a cool place. Most people dismiss TJ because there's so many tourists, but hey, man,
Yeah.
south of the
Yeah.
border, it's real, brother.
Yeah, it's real. I can vouch.
So if you ever get a chance, I didn't know about Playa del Carmen. It's a small town, but it's also known. It attracts a lot of backpackers from Europe, so there's a lot of tourists. If you can imagine, like the Sunset Strip on a beach in Mexico, it kind of has that vibe because there's a lot of partying going on. There's a lot of debauchery. There's a lot of music, but it's really small. It's like if you can squeeze in all that in like a couple blocks.
Yeah.
That's what Playa del Carmen is. And so we went to this bar and saw the sun come up. The next morning. It was one of those kind of nights.
Nice.
And then somebody told me, "Have you been to Cozumel?" And I'm like, "What's Cozumel?" It's like, "Oh, it's an island, like a 20-minute boat ride from Playa del Carmen." So spent the night, and the next morning we were snorkeling, which is considered, I think, the easternmost part of Mexico. And if you go to the top, you can see Cuba at night, the lights.
Yeah, yeah. Because I
Uh,
see that's on a lot of itineraries for cruise ships. Like they make a point to go out there.
to Cozumel.
Cozumel, yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about it until that time, and so that was as far as I made it. So a part of it was hitchhiked, a part of it was on bus, a part of it was walking. There's at one point when I was coming into Mexico City, the bus driver made me he snuck me into the so underneath the bus, if you've ever taken the Grey Dog, there's the on long trips. There's a luggage compartment, and then next to it is another compartment where, for long drives, the second driver will sleep.
Oh, I didn't
And
know
he snuck me in there, man. That was a crazy trip, man. I'm riding underneath the bus as I'm cruising into Mexico City. Underneath the bus.
that is cool, actually. I want to see that movie.
It wasn't by choice, man. I ended up catching the bus at a crossroads, literally a crossroads in Mexico. They call it the crucero. So my mom lives in a small little town, and we don't have like a proper bus terminal. So you have to take a taxi to the highway, and at this highway you have the crossroads going north and south. The bus is going north from Mexico City to Tijuana, and then going south from Tijuana to Mexico City. So I get there, and this bus is like they have classes of buses. They have the lower class, middle class, upper class. This just happened to be an upper class one that I got. I gave the bus driver the equivalent of $50, and I'm stoked because I got my own seat. It's nice and air conditioned. They got a TV. It's I wake up in the morning because it's an overnight trip. It's about a 15-hour bus ride, and we stop to get breakfast. And when we get back on the bus, he's letting everybody get on the bus. And then when it's my turn to get on, he stops me and he's like, "Tú no, not you," And I'm like, "What?" He's like, he opens that compartment that I mentioned, and he's like, "Métete, get in."
Yeah.
And I look at him, and I'm like, "What? Like, I ain't going in there." I
Yeah.
look inside,
Yeah.
and there's like this twin mattress that's all like dirty, like soiled, and like a sarape. And
Yeah.
he just looks at me and he's like, "Hey, you want to get to Mexico City or not?" And I look around. I'm like, "Where am I?" You know? I'm like, "All right, man, fuck it."
Yeah. Wow.
So I get in, you know, and it had, I don't know if you're ever when you were traveling down south, but uh, there's these comic books in Mexico and in South America that are they're pocket size, and a lot of times they show explicit content, you know, like sex and stuff. And so there's like a stack of those in there. It's like basically the equivalent of comic book porn.
Yeah, you're like basically in a dorm room on wheels. That's what you are.
Yeah, it was. That's a good way of describing it. And
Yeah.
it had a little window, and I cracked open the window. And at the time, I was smoking cigarettes, and so I lit up a cigarette. And I kid you not, I had a copy of On the Road with me, so I'm reading On the Road, smoking a cigarette, this little, and I'm just watching the cars just go.
Yeah.
And to end the story, so we all of a sudden the bus stops, the door opens, and the driver's like, "Get the fuck out!" So I get out and I look around, and I'm like, "Where am I?" You know? And he stopped the bus before he pulled into the terminal to let me out. And I didn't realize until afterwards why he did that was so that he can pocket the $50 that I had paid. So I basically did not exist on that. There was no record of me on that ride.
Oh, wow.
And in retrospect, you know, I think it's kind of dangerous to do that. I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing that, you know, to your listeners or to anybody. It was a different time. This was pre 9/11. I was 20 years old, and you know,
Sure.
a lot more reckless than I am now, and willing to take those risks. But you know, I'm 40 now, and I'm married, and I would consider twice doing that this time around.
Oh yeah, that's pre-corona too. But no, I mean, I think those are the kind of stories we think about. You know, like you were telling me this story, and I remember one time, you know, I had a gig in Italy. I was DJing a wedding, so you can imagine getting a gig to fly out to Italy to DJ, and you have like this fantasy of this rocking out this foreign land. But what really happened was trying to travel city to city on a bus or trying to set at a depot, and you didn't know the language, and I flagged somebody down. I'm like hang on the side of this bus, and like it's just funny how like when it's done, you're like, man, that's something I would have not have done under any circumstances. But you got to do what you got to do. So I totally am with that part.
That's
But
dope. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I'm just saying it was an experience. It's being a wedding DJ halfway across the world. You know.
Yeah, man, that's pretty awesome. How'd you get that gig?
Well, it was the couple. They're American, but they're of Italian descent, and they wanted to get married in the homelands. And they went to my buddy, who has this big. He has a lot more SEO presence. So basically, he paid for the advertising, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not flying across the world to do it. Would you want to do it?" And back then, talk about taking risks. Now I probably would say no, even without the pandemic. But I was just starting out. I needed the reviews. I'm like, there's no way I would have gone to Italy anyway. They didn't pay much. They paid for my flight plus one legal dollar. But I was like, look, if I get there and take content, you know, I can use that for promotional materials. So I said, okay. And I got a couple phrase books, and I took an Italian class online, and I flew out there in November of 18 just to see what that would be. And I flew into Rome on Norwegian Airlines. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It is the discount long haul airlines where you pay for like your seat assignments this much, food is this much, a blanket is this much, you know. Spirit Airlines with 12-hour flights, and I was there for a week. Went to Rome, took a train to Naples, a bus from Naples to Fiore, and vice versa, just to be a part of this wedding. And it was fun, but it was nerve wracking. I didn't realize how American I was, how ugly American I was, until it's like sunset on an Italian hillside on a Saturday. You're fighting sunlight to get to the hotel, and you can't read any signs. And you're like in the countryside saying, "Does anyone speak English?" Of course not. It's Italy. Why would anyone, you know? Just trying to make that work. And I said, okay, I gotta make sure that if I ever have the means to travel more, so I don't have situations like that, you know. But the whole thing was fun, man. The whole thing was great.
Look at you, international DJ. That's badass.
Yeah, it was a funny story, man. And I guess I learned so much about myself. But yeah, that was the one time I was like, we're going to Italy, we're making it happen. But
So, what did you take for your gear?
Oh, so
to
this
spin.
one, this was great. So I had my laptop and I had like an emergency like MIDI controller, because they told me, oh well, it'd be like a tech writer thing. You just tell me what you want and get something. So in my brain on the plane, I'm smiling. I'm thinking this is like Vegas. You know what I mean? Like, oh, here's my technical requirements, and I land there, and there's supposed to be a guy, but the guy wasn't there because I guess something got lost in translation. He thought I was asking for a quote and not booking anything. So we find the guy the day of, and he basically has his gear, but like it's all stuff I don't have drivers for, and I'm like in the Italian countryside, so I can't even Wi-Fi it. So I took my laptop, the backup controller, and we routed that backup controller into like his mixer out into two speakers, which was kind of like not again when you're mine, you're thinking about the Calvin Harris like but it was just kind of like a backyard wedding kind of setup, but in this hotel on the side of the cliffs of Amalfi Coast. So.
Damn, that sounds dope. Just the location itself, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it
I,
changes you too.
I don't know how you do weddings, man. So I did a gig for I was spinning a set for and I won't name names, but it was an organization that was promoting young Latina empowerment. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm all for it. You know, I want to support. And it was on the rooftop of Don Chente, which is in downtown, right across the street from the Staples Center.
Right.
Bomb ass view of downtown, magic hour set, and I got hired for that gig based on another set that I had spun on, which the person who hired me had heard my set, so she knew what I spun. She knew what she was getting. You know, it
Yeah.
wasn't like a blind referral or anything like that. So I show up spinning my set, doing my thing, and then this lady comes up to me and she's like, I'm sure you've gotten this many times. Do you got such and such to spin? And her request was by this band called Mana, which is a very well-known, popular Mexican band.
Yeah.
I don't personally own any of their records, man. And mind you, I'm spinning vinyl, right?
Right.
Uh, and and I told her, I'm like, I'm sorry, I do not. The closest thing I have is Los Amigos Invisibles, which is a dance band from Venezuela. And the look she gave me of like disgust, like how dare you come to this party without a Mana record? And after that, she put me in a bad mood, and I was like, ugh. And after that, I'm like, okay, no more of these kinds of gigs. You know, I'm only gonna take gigs that will allow me to spin the records that I want to spin, and
Oh yeah.
so that's kind of where I'm at right now. And
Well, you're on vinyl, man. Like one of the disadvantages of being on digital is that you get like the phone in the party. You know, you like wave the phone in your face, no words, just the song is on the screen. You're like, okay, I see Justin Bieber. What do you want me to do with it? I'm not. It's just a weird vibe.
yeah, man, I feel you on that, man.
But let's
I
talk
did,
about your spinning,
however.
though.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I did, however, take the digital leap, man.
Okay.
I invested in a digital controller. I got the MacBook that I'm gonna start using. I downloaded Serato. I did my first hybrid gig 2 summers ago at the South Arts Fest, where I had a little netbook
Okay.
and I brought my vinyl. And there's certain tracks that I didn't have time to get the vinyl because it was going to take too long for me to order and shit like that. So I did
Right.
a hybrid set. I spun vinyl with some digital, and then I did my first all digital set last summer at a party in downtown LA. And it wasn't my rig. I was a guest DJ, and the DJ who was hosting it, man, he had like a Pioneer. I couldn't even tell you the gear that he had, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just blown away. I was like, what is this? You know, and I gotta admit, man, when I was younger, I was very much a vinyl snob, but I've grown to appreciate, things that you can do with digital. And so he's like, just got to bring your flash drive. And I was just like, what? That's it?
Yeah. Yeah. We're good to
Like,
go,
just,
man.
yeah, just patch it in. And I was like, oh shit, you know. And so it was very much just learning that day, never touching this mixer, never having done Serato before, matching, BPMs through this little interface. And so that was cool, but I'm so used to spinning vinyl for 20 years that like I wanted to do like the whole, like,
Right.
and I'm like, how do I cue this? And he's like, look, there's like a little wheel right here. That's like the record. And I'm like,
Where's the cue button? Right
yeah.
there.
So I was kind of doing that thing, and but it was a cool experience, man. And I'm no longer a vinyl snob. I've grown to appreciate the digital world, and now that I'm older, I don't like carrying a crate full of vinyl. They get fucking heavy.
Yeah, that's
It
it,
doesn't
man.
mean you got a flashlight. You just put it in your little pocket, and boom, you're good to go.
That's the stuff. It's that and worrying about warping, especially when it's hot like this. But I saw you spin a couple times on your show, Persistence of Sound, of which I wasn't a guest on. But I want you to describe this to people because I try to do this to others, and it just blows their mind. And that here, like smack dab in Boyle Heights, right? One of the most like culturally awesome parts of town, but it's like fighting off gentrification. Gary Alvarez has a show, like almost like in the movie Do the Right Thing, where it's like on the street side where you're mixing and talking about music every week. Like, walk me through Persistence of Sound. Like, what does that mean? How did you get the gig, and how did it evolve?
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. I remember I reached out to you, I think, during our first year. We just
Yeah,
celebrated our 4 year
16, I
anniversary.
think.
Was it 16? Damn,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
We're up to like 180 something. We just celebrated our 4 year anniversary in February. Thank you, brother. And you were actually our MC,
My penultimate gig this year.
and you did an awesome job.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for that again. The way it came about was kind of like many things in my life, man. A little bit of being at the right place at the right time. So, as you mentioned, the show itself is part of the Radio Espacio network, and Radio Espacio itself is a little radio station, internet radio station, uh, that's run out of a place called Espacio 1839, which literally translates to Space 1839. And it's this little boutique slash gallery slash little marketplace right in the heart of Bowl Heights, which is a home away from home for me. I'm not originally from Boyle Heights, but I'm grateful to be a part of that community. And one day I was working on a documentary project for this organization called the East LA Community Corporation. I was shooting a promo for their 20th anniversary, and I was just scouting locations in the neighborhood because their headquarters is right around the corner. And I remember walking by the sidewalk, and there's a sandwich board that said vinyl and an arrow pointing inside. And whenever I see that, man, like
Trap, man. It's a trap.
it's a trap, but I just like I zero in, and then I'm on a mission, and then I just get sidetracked. So I go in, and sure enough, at that time they had just opened that particular location. So there's a lot of white walls, but they did have some merch. And what caught my attention was a lot of the stuff that they slang. There is art and T-shirts and jewelry that are designed and handmade by local artists and vendors, and that straight away just caught my attention. And I got into this and then obviously I saw the vinyl too, and I flipped through it. It was a little overpriced, so I didn't end up buying anything. But I was able to start a conversation with Nico, who was running it at the time and still is running it, and just started asking him all these questions. And I saw that they had this glass partition, and on the other side of this glass partition were some 1200s, and that is like another sign for me. It's like they were just like glowing, like.
Right.
So I hit him up. I'm like, "What do you got those 1200s there for?" And he's like, "Oh, we have a little radio station here." And at the time, it was called Radio Sombra. It was
Yeah.
under a different
That's what I called it when I was there. Yeah.
yeah, it was under a different leadership at the time. That was run by another person who was a part of that collective. And I asked him, I'm like, "Hey man, like this is really cool, like how do I get involved?" And he's like, "Well, come by one of these days when we're having like an open mic, and I'll introduce you to Marco, who runs the radio station, and we'll see what happens." Flash forward, nothing came of it. I went about, finished my little project for the community corporation, and one day I get invited to an open mic there, and I hit up Nico again, and he didn't remember me. I'm one of those guys that's like totally forgettable. Like he's
What?
like, "Who are you again?" And I'm like, "We met a couple weeks ago. I was
I'm
here." He's
totally
like,
forgettable.
"Well, he didn't remember, man."
Yeah.
So, anyways, long story short, he's like, "Well, you should talk to Marco. He's never here, but he's outside smoking a cigarette. Go hit him up." So I hit up Marco. I introduced myself, and he kind of gives me this look like, "Who's this white boy?" And I'm like, "I ain't no white boy. I'm a Chicano from Bell. So let's get that let's get that straightened out." And I told him that I wanted to spin some records, and he told me, "Why don't you come by next Wednesday? Bring your records, and I'll show you how to use the gear, and you can have your own show." And I was like, "What? This is too easy, too good to be true."
Right.
So I show up next Wednesday with my crate of vinyl, and the look on his face is like,
Oh,
like,
he's actually showed up. Yeah.
yeah. I called his bluff. He didn't think I was gonna show.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, Marco was a man of his word, and he showed me how to use the gear. I had been spinning at that point since 2000, and this is in 2016, so over a decade. But I had never used a soundboard. I had never talked to a mic. I'm super shy, and so all of these things are new to me. And he showed me how to use the gear. An hour later, I had my very first show, and I did it for about 4 weeks just by myself, spinning records for 2 hours. At the time, it was a noon show, and then I realized, fuck, like I don't know how long. I don't have enough records I don't know how long this show is gonna go, but I'm gonna run out of records eventually.
Yeah.
So then I had this bright idea, and I'm like, what if I have like a guest DJ segment where like all my friends, because all my friends are like creative people in one way or another, and a lot of them are musicians. And I had this flashback to when we were kids in the '90s growing up, and we would just so excited when new music would come out. We'd go to Middle Earth Records and we would get like the British import of like the new Oasis single or the Stone Roses, whatever it may be. And it was just an exciting time for new music and saving all your lunch money and going to spend it on records. And I miss that, because we're in our 30s now. Nobody really has the time to hang out and listen to a whole record all day.
Right.
But then I thought, well, why instead of doing that, like, why don't I have this guest DJ segment and have my friends come here for an hour, and spin about record, we can spin records and just talk about the projects that they're working on. And I decided to call the show Patched In, and that I took actually from my experience at Chapman, patching in XLRs or Stingers or whatever, and I just thought
Yeah.
it sounded like a cool name for the guest DJ segment. And so week 5 was my first guest, my friend Steve Mungaro, who I've known since the mid '90s, partying in Southgate. He's a bass player, musician, and a producer. And I totally forgot that you were volume. What did you say? 16?
I think I'm in the 20s somewhere. I'm actually looking
Oh,
it
in the
up
20s.
now. Yeah, because it was very.
Yeah,
Because I
man.
remember what it was. Because I had to come. I had my last day job where they made me dress up. I had to leave that job early to make your show on time, and so I remember showing up there with like my button down shirt and my
Yeah,
khakis, being like,
yeah.
"Oh, I don't fit in here at all. What
You
am
were
I doing?"
you were looking sharp, man. Very professional. I do remember. And
Persistence of Sound, Volume 27. That is
wow.
the official number on it.
Yeah, man. So at that point, I had only been doing it for 27 weeks, which is what I'm not really good at math.
5 months, maybe 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, yeah, man. So I was really new. Like I said, the whole radio show was a new concept. I had never done anything like that. It took me a while to kind of find my groove. I didn't want to copy what other people were doing. And most importantly, I wanted to spin music that I like and that I listen to because, this is before I had Sirius Radio, and so I was still listening to terrestrial. And the terrestrial radio of the mid 2015s just wasn't what it was when I was growing up in the '90s in LA, and it was very frustrating to listen to the music that I was listening to on the radio. So that can that gave birth to the show itself, and just having the opportunity to hang out with friends and spin records and catch up with them because a lot of times I don't get to see them. And then that kind of took on a life of its own, and I started to meet more musicians and more creative people, and then I had a long line of guests. Like every week was a new guest, and I started meeting new people and collaborating with new people, and
Yeah.
I've basically all my guests have I've had a guest from the whole entire creative spectrum, from comedians, DJs, photographers, painters, musicians, muralists, chefs. I've had a samba dancer. The only thing I haven't had so far is a ballet dancer. So if you know of a ballet dancer,
I
send them
don't, but
my
if I
way.
did, yeah, I totally will. Just real quick, what's your favorite Sirius XM channel? I'm just curious.
I'm not gonna lie, man. I listen to Howard Stern.
Okay.
I am a fan. He gets me through LA traffic, man, and he's a master storyteller and probably one of the greatest interviewers of all time. So I mostly listen to that, except when he does the reruns. And when he does, I got my presets to answer your question: Beatles,
Okay.
uh, Soul Town, which is all Motown and Marvin Gaye, which I'm a huge fan of. 80s, because I'm a child of the 80s. 90s, because I came of age in the 90s. And then there's a really cool station that plays some cool jams every now and then. I think it's uh, Sirius. It's like a college. It's got kind of like a college station
Oh,
vibe.
XMU or something like that.
XMU, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
They'll play tracks on there that I actually play on my show, and I'm like, oh shit, that's pretty cool. Like they're actually playing
yeah,
this stuff. I think that's six of them, right? Uh,
yeah. I think that's about right.
yeah, man.
Um, I'm hits one because I have to know what the new songs are for work, and Pitbull's Globalization is my favorite. I also do the Groove, Channel 50, the old school R&B, soul, and classic R&B. I do Seriously Sinatra, and that's what, four, five. Uh,
Sinatra, really? Is that because you're from New York?
Actually, I actually like Bobby Darin. Like he's a guy that. So my dad is an immigrant, and he really took on to the mid-century songbook really easily. So when I hear Bobby Darin or Dean Martin, it isn't like, oh, this is classic. It's my dad in his ice cold air conditioning of his car, driving, taking me for Carville ice cream. You know what I mean? Like it's very nostalgic in that way. So I have a soft spot for that. And yeah, that's usually the big ones. Where I'll do I think it's called Fight Now. That's like their combat sports channel because they have a wrestling show called Busted Open. Those are like my six. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, man. My wife got serious after I did, and she listens to the Groove and Rock the Bells. She's a hip hopper from NorCal.
Bring back Backspin. Backspin was so much better than Rock the Bell. Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm just getting on my soapbox here. But yeah, it's a good channel for sure.
Yeah, and the other one is the reggae station. She loves reggae.
The Joint, yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
one. So yeah, I was a fan of XM for the longest time. I finally got it like 2 years ago, and it helps me out because like there's so much songs you have to have in your head as an open format DJ. Because when you're in the mix doing 70s, someone throws like a country song, and you gotta think how would I go from there to there. You know, what I like having it is like you may hear a deep cut, like, oh, I forgot about like Timex Crew, or I forgot about you know what I mean, like I forgot about the Fat Band. Let me see how can I make that in and work. You know, but still
Yeah,
all
that's
good.
dope, man. We got so much stuff in common from spinning records, being DJs. You have a podcast now. Um, I was reluctant to call my show Persistence of Sound a podcast, because I guess I had a preconceived notion of what that was, and I was kind of trying to avoid that. And because it was a live show every Wednesday, uh, I felt like it was still more of a radio station. My idea of a podcast was that it was pre-recorded and you can go back and listen to it. And so
Sure.
I kind of made that distinction. But over the years, I've kind of started to embrace podcasts, especially now that they're blowing up.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing a podcast now, and I feel like it's kind of like the Wild West. And I got to say, I haven't done the show, so Espacio 1839 shut down in mid March, and I haven't done a show since then, and I don't know if and when it's gonna open. And my wife's, she suggested, why don't you just do it from home, or why don't you do it over Zoom? And
Yeah.
it's just not the same, like for me, having done it for 4 years, the energy that happens when you're in a room with the other person, there's nothing quite like that, especially when I've had live musical performances. My last show, which at the time we didn't know it was our last show, I had an all-female mariachi group in there.
Oh wow.
And they were jamming, dude, like with the guitarron and the violin and the vocals, and it was amazing, and I've had full bands in there, um and not to diminish what you can do with Zoom and this new StreamYard that you're using that I've never used. But yeah, man, I'm kind of hoping that the space will open up soon. I don't know how we're gonna work it because it is a community radio station. There are other DJs there,
Yeah.
and everything gets touched. The mixers, the turntables, the mouse, the everything. So we're gonna have to figure out a way of us all sharing that space safely in the time of COVID.
True. I mean, that's a good point I haven't think about. But I was gonna say, I feel that way too. A lot of DJs during the lockdown have done like live mixes on Twitch, and that's not really my vibe. Not to say I don't like that, but as a MC and open format DJ, I'm not necessarily booked on how I can, scratch break beats as much as I am being able to make the crowd move. And it's hard to do that when there's no crowd. So I see what you're saying, but you're right though. We do have a lot in common, and I know we're running a little low on time, but I want to talk about one thing that we do have in common. Also on top of that, and this is why I picked up the phone or messaged you about it. I see you working on a graphic novel. What? That is awesome. Can you put me onto this? Please.
Well, let me take a step back. It's not being developed as a graphic novel, although now that I have the concept art for Brown Falcon, I'm open to developing as a graphic novel for a couple of reasons, and I'll explain a little bit further down the line. But I have this series that I'm developing, a Latinx superhero called Brown Falcon, and when I conceived of it a couple years ago, this is pre Black Panther, uh, before Black Panther had come out. I imagined it as a live action series, and so my idea was to develop this character who is a Navy SEAL vet, who's toured the Middle East, hundreds of missions. He was actually training he's a helicopter pilot. He was training for the mission to assassinate Osama bin Laden. The mission before that, he gets injured and he gets taken off SEAL Team 6, which is the team that smoked bin Laden. And he comes back and he sees what's going on in his community with the ICE raids and the police killings. And he ends up getting involved and steps up and steps into this role as Brown Falcon to conceal his identity. And so that's kind of how I imagined it at the time. It's kind of morphed over time. It's set in Long Beach because I love Long Beach. It's my adopted home, and I think it's very cinematic. And I feel like of all the neighborhoods in LA, it's still relatively unknown, which I kind of appreciate. And I don't want to burn it out because I don't want all the transplants to end up in Long Beach and turn it into Santa Monica.
Fair enough.
No disrespect to you, brother.
I don't. I live in Culver City, so it's fine.
Oh, well, that's right down the street from where I'm
Yeah,
at now.
yeah. I live in Palm Side. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm over by Pan's Diner.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're close.
Yeah, super close. But also, Long Beach is very cinematic. It's you got the Long Beach on the skyline, you got the ocean, and it's just a really cool place, and it's got its own vibe. So, I wrote a pilot for it, and I've been pitching it around town to anybody who's willing to listen. And I finally got around. I had a friend of mine do some storyboards for one of the major scenes in the pilot, where he throws a cop off the Villa Rivera building, which at the time was the highest building in Long Beach. Doesn't kill the cop, but he throws him off the roof to teach him a lesson for all you cops out there.
How to get your bones broken.
Yeah, exactly. And then recently I finally had some extra funds to invest in the suit design. And so I reached out to a fellow Chapman, an undergrad who's an animator. I saw him post some stuff on Instagram and I liked his work, and I reached out to him and I'm like, hey, have you ever done, concept art for a character before? And he's like, no, but I'm down. And I'm like, all right, let's try it, And so over the last couple of months, we've just been developing the suit, and I basically what I told them is I wanted to create. You ever been into a carniceria where they have the calendar and it's got the Aztec warrior and he's holding the Aztec princess in his arms, she's dying.
Yeah, yeah. A pose like that, but sure.
Right, and I'm sure if you haven't seen the calendar, you've seen it on a lowrider somewhere, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted the Aztec warrior concept, but I wanted it to be as if we were living in the world of Tron, because
Okay.
I wanted it to exist in present day, and so the idea was the Aztec spirit, warrior spirit, with 21st century military grade technology, because he has access to that kind of gear. And so what you saw, the image that you're referring to, is the work that came out of our collaboration. And recently, I've been having a lot of general meetings with some showrunners and some execs, and kind of testing the waters to see, because we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, nobody's shooting anything, so after seeing when I first posted that image, people thought that it was an animated show, or that it was a comic book, and so
Right.
that kind of gave me the idea of, like, I'm open to that, since an animated series, we don't need physical production. It seems like it's a lot easier, and also I'm a fan of Batman comic books, so I figure maybe I can at least do a pilot in the form of a graphic novel and have that as IP to pitch around.
Sure.
So if you know of any down ass comic book artists, send them my way. I reached out to one on Facebook and he hasn't responded, and so I'm gonna keep trying. But
I
ideally, I would like to see it as a live action.
I totally troll the groups on Facebook. They're like, I need a comic artist, or yeah, I mean that's the way to do it because those guys rotate so fast of who could do it, who's booked, who's not booked. It's like catching a bus, you know. One thing I learned making my comic book hero Silver Streak is that it really comes down to what you as the publisher can afford. You know what I mean? Like, there's lots of guys that can do it, but you want to make sure you get that one that you can afford. That's dope, and that's been like threading the needle. So.
How'd you find your illustrator?
Yeah, Facebook groups. I think that's like comic book illustrators. Basically, the other illustrators get together and they post like their concept art, sequential art, and then you just go and say, "Here's my concept. Here's my budget per page." If you want them to do the inks and color or whatever, and then you say what you want. I know a friend of mine that does like he goes to like Behance or one of those freelancer sites, and so he outsources it to artists out of the country. For obviously the cost effective nature of things, and has like 2-page competitions where he votes for the artists he wants. He pays them, of course, through the 2 pages of time, but he gets 2-page samples of everyone and goes, I like this art style the best. I'm going with that.
That sounds dope. Can you send me the link afterwards when we're done?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, man. I
But
appreciate it.
yeah, I want to see that grow, man, because that made me stop scrolling. I was like, oh wait, what is this?
I'm glad it caught your attention, man. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that it'll catch the attention of some Hollywood movers and shakers, or at least some gatekeepers. I mean, you know what it's like being a filmmaker and just hustling and pitching and all the rejection letters, and but I got to keep going, until something cracks. And I'm at that point where I feel like I'm just like maybe 1 or 2 degrees removed from meeting that one person who's going to be like, I like that idea, let's develop it, let's make it happen.
I know the feeling. I get that same vibe too. But I just want to say thank you, man, for coming on the show. New Amsterdam Radio, the podcast for
Oh shit, are we
creatives.
done?
We are done, baby. We made it.
Damn.
Yeah, it was
Time went by quick.
easy peasy. Yo, do me the world a favor though. If they want to like look at what you're working on, they want to follow you on social media. How can they get in touch with you?
So you can find me at Gary Alvarez Castañeda. That's my Instagram handle. I post on there pretty regularly. If you want to listen to past shows of Persistence of Sound, we do have a Mixcloud archive. All 180 plus volumes are there, going back to February of 2016. You can find Flobo's episode on there. What number was it?
27.
27. So you can go onto Mixcloud. We also have a Persistence of Sound Facebook page that because of the lockdown, and because I don't have a weekly live show, what I've been doing is what I call the Persistence of Sound Lockdown series. And every Wednesday, which is when my show would normally air, I drop a 13-song set. It's a mix of new releases mixed in with some classics, mixed in with some of the jams that I like to listen to for people who are interested and who are looking for new music. Here's another alternative for you guys to listen to. And other than that, I'm starting to use Twitter more because it seems to get a lot of traction. I don't know what your thoughts are about Twitter. I'm kind of a newcomer to it.
I use it for different aspects of my strategy. Like Instagram is more for like photos of me doing crazy things and all the important stuff. But like when I'm live watching a TV show, or if I want to try new jokes or material, it's it's better to do on Twitter.
So I will say this one thing. One of the reasons why I've been using it is I'm in a writers group now, and we put out a call uh, uh, on Twitter to meet with writers and showrunners and executives. And we so far since that went out, we've met with like over a dozen.
Whoa.
And so if you're a filmmaker or writer out there, looking to connect, just put something out there on Twitter, and surprisingly, you will get a response. And so a little insider tip for you and your peeps.
Dang. All right. I'll be famous now.
Hey, are you still doing sound design at all?
No, man, I haven't sound designed a thing in a long time. I think I will do things a little bit here and there for my own personal projects, but as far as that being a gig, I moved on. Yeah,
All right. Well, we'll have to
yeah,
have another discussion
yeah.
about
Well,
that.
I don't know,
When
man.
I have my show again, I'll have you come back.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't know. I might get sucked back in there because I'm doing so many of these podcasts now. Like I think I have 6 shows, 7 shows now that it might get pulled back into doing sound design, editing all over again. It's for my own stuff. So who knows?
Right on, brother.
Yeah,
Well, thanks
man.
again, man. I appreciate you inviting me and reaching out. I would like to plug one thing really quick. So I was invited to host a cafecito with the Cal Alumni Association. It's next Thursday, I think at 7 p.m. I'll send you the link if you could share through your network. And it's
Yeah.
basically me doing what I just did, but for Cal freshmen, incoming freshmen, and current students, and just sharing about my experience as a Cal student, and hopefully sharing some experience, strength, and hope with the next generation.
Experience, strength, and hope. That's the brand right there, man. Whoo, that's rough. I love it.
All right. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man.
All right, can I catch you later? Come back
And
soon,
you stay
please.
safe, brother, man. And I'll talk to you soon.